So tonight, though, we're going to continue our discussion that we've been having for the last couple of weeks about Un-SuperHero Me, and exchanging the cape for more grace for ourselves. And Cassandra has been working her way through the list of different symptoms and different characteristics for this of the superhero, and what some of the things that we do to ourselves. Um, and the last couple of weeks have been so rich and engaging that we haven't really gotten super far into it. But I know Cassandra would like to see if we can push through to the end today. So we're going to do questions last. Yes, Cassandra, questions, comments, share time at the end.
Yes.
Okay, perfect. So, with saying that, I am going to turn it over to Miss Cassandra James Weathersby, our master expert. And welcome back, you guys. I love when you choose to spend your evening with us because I know it's getting late for some of you. So go ahead, Cassandra, take it away.
Well, thank you so much again, Anna, for having me. This has been just such a great time here in the masterclass with you. I was really looking forward to it all day. Hi to all the familiar faces and some that I may not know. It's good to see you guys. Always truly a pleasure here on the Circles app. Well, I just wanted to kind of recap before we get into the rest of the list. And hopefully, we will power through and make it through these last few points. So, just to recap, when this kind of came to me, again, part, theater geek and part TV baby, and have just always been drawn to superheroes, you know, ever since I was a little kid. And as I started to intentionally heal, I just started to notice that some of these things that were not necessarily the healthiest with superheroes that I adored and I loved were things that I did and I saw others do in our own intentional, before we made it to our intentional healing journey. And sometimes sprinkled in there because, this stuff doesn't change overnight. So I have 16 points of the cost of the cape, basically. These are the costs that superheroes wind up paying to wear the cape. And when I say that term superheroes, keep in mind it's not a thing of overconfidence, it's not a thing of conceit. It is a place of replacing the things that we need to do for ourselves for service oftentimes and leaning into people pleasing instead of sometimes leaning into ourselves. So with that, I'll get into the points. The first one, the first cost of the cape, is that they usually have a traumatic origin story that they refuse to deal with. Now, of course, we know that many people have trauma and we don't compare traumas, but oftentimes in this scenario, there's a refusal to really deal with it. There's a lot of pushing down, there's a lot of ignoring. And even if it's not ignoring what happened, it may be ignoring how we feel about what happened. Number two, they never experience lasting peace. Um, it's from one drama to the next drama, from one save to the next save, from one emergency to the next. Excuse me. Number three, they have terrible personal relationships oftentimes. Just the relationships are not good. And number four, they keep the ones that they love at an emotionally safe distance. Uh, you can only get so close, and then you got to go. Number five, they save the world and leave themselves to drown. Oh man, I know I could resonate with that one so much before this intentional healing journey. Number six, they sacrifice all and suffer in silence. People just don't know how they're really dealing. Number seven, they often see the people they help as weak or less than, in need of saving, rather than partners in healing. Number eight, they so often fight battles that most people have not even asked them to fight. They just around here volunteering for stuff. Number 9, they dismiss the need to fellowship with the very people they are trying to save. Again, kind of that I have to help you because you don't know any better or you need my help, but I'm okay. Number 10, most have unresolved trauma and help people through the lens of that trauma. Now, on this point, and we talked about that a little bit last week. There's nothing wrong with using what we've conquered to, or what we're in the process of healing from, to help others. But in this scenario, because they're not addressing what's really happening and what's really going on with themselves and doing the work, what happens is now everything is glazed over when they're helping them through the lens of what happened to them. And when we do that, it clouds our vision and we don't help people the best way. Number 11, their pain never matters. Pretty much because they've taught people that their pain never matters. Number 12, they often become voluntary martyrs. They just dying for no reason, just out here giving up, just here it is. Number 13, they often have others who emulate them, not truly understanding the sacrifice it takes to be them. Number 14, they keep the struggle to themselves and a small group of enablers. Again, notice that word there is enablers, not friends. Number 15, they find every reason not to rest and genuinely live in the moment, always thinking and planning for the next fight. And number 16, love life. That. Oh, can we just get some hearts for Renee? Renee is a rock star, putting them in the chat. Just awesome.
Yes. Thank you for the, yeah, isn't it wonderful, you guys? I love having like the note taker in my rooms and somebody that will keep the chat going and keep the resources going. I love that. Thank you so much for that.
Yes, yes.
So before we continue on, Cassandra, I just want to make sure that, I see Kelly and Riley and Becca and Tracy and Elisa joined. I know Z has your hand up. I think Cassandra's taking questions and thoughts at the end of the room tonight, you guys, a little bit differently. But keep your hand up, Z, or you can put it in the chat, but we will get to your question. Renee, thank you so much for that. All right, Cassandra, so where did we leave off last time? Where do you want to start?
So we are going to start this week at number 10. No, number 11. I think that is about where we made it.
Oh, yeah. Oh, we got farther than I thought. Okay, yes.
We did power through some. Um, and so with number 11 is their pain never matters. And
Okay.
again, that oftentimes is because we have taught people that our pain never matters. You know, this is a reminder when we are weak, when we're working out or tired, how do we treat ourselves? What are the messages that we're saying to ourselves? Do we let others even know we are at capacity, or that it's important that we take a break, that we've had enough? But oftentimes we don't. And that's where that pain never matters. The having to push through no matter what, oh, I'm tired. Oh, but you can do it. And not understanding that we can't do it because we've done it for so long that we just give people the impression that we can do it when we really are exhausted and at our wits' end. I heard this great quote about this that reminded me of this from Dr. Gabor. He said that you were the one who grew up being really strong precisely because you were the one that was not powerful. I'm going to say that again. He said, you were the one that grew up being really strong precisely because you're the one that was not powerful. He went on.
Wow.
I know, right? I had to clutch my invisible pearls, y'all. He goes on to say, see, when you're not powerful, you don't have to be strong. See, when you're powerful, you don't have to be strong. You just let things happen.
Hmm.
Have to be strong, it means you can't let things happen. You have to take charge of them. Again,
Wow.
my invisible pearls. How many of us from People Pleasers University also felt that we had to control stuff? And that may have shown up in a number of ways, whether it was the house being meticulous or what you did at work having to be a certain way, or not allowing people to help you because they couldn't do it like you did it. It's just going to take too long for me to explain it. I'll just do it.
Yep. Yep.
You know, can't let it happen. Got to be in control.
Yep.
You
No,
know,
that makes total sense. Yep.
yeah. Um, but when you give up your strength, you gain your power. Again, he had me clutching my invisible pearls. You have to give up your strength to gain your power. That's where putting that cape down matters. Because while we're holding on to it, while we're holding on to the illusion of control, because it's not even control, because what what can we really control? Most of us in this space already have learned that we can't control other grown people.
Nope. 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 Nope.
Do that.
I'm getting another. Yeah. That's getting my 100% right there. I'm giving my 100% or on that comment. Yes, we cannot.
Mm-mm. We cannot control other grown people. So we've learned that, right? But what else do we actually have control over? Really, not much, but ourselves.
Hmm.
We do have control over our response, over making a decision to do this work. So, number 12. Number 12, they often become voluntary martyrs. Okay. And what does a martyr
Hmm.
do? A martyr becomes an example due to their heroism, um, and usually winds up being sacrificed or sacrificing themselves for the greater good. They become a symbol to others. And this thing about being voluntary martyrs, okay, you give it all up, you work yourself to the bone, you're doing everything for everybody else, you're saying yes to everything for everybody else, you're putting out this fire, you're doing this in ministry, you're doing this
Yep.
at school, you're doing this for your spouse, you're doing this for your in-laws, you're doing this, the list just goes on and on and on and on. And then when your health fails, then what? When you emotionally can't take it anymore, and then what? And again, these, if some of these start to resonate with you, this isn't a thing to beat yourself up. It's just a recognition, because a reminder, we do not heal from that which we don't acknowledge. So it's definitely not to beat you up. It's just a reminder of some things as you're continuing this healing journey. And so as we're looking at the reality that sacrificing ourselves to the point of not really living or having very short spurts of pleasure, for many who don't even appreciate what you do, is not living. It's just not living. It's barely existing. Are we sacrificing the life we should have for the one we think everyone else needs from us? Are we hurting ourselves to let others live and making ourselves a martyr? And so, what's on the other side of that? Remember that wonderful word that we started to learn? No.
Yep. It's a complete sentence, you guys. One word, one syllable.
It's a complete sentence. And we hear that, but it's a different thing putting it into action. And for those of us who've earned these degrees from People Please University, when we think about these superheroes, they wrote the curriculum, they read the
Yep.
dean, as Edna pointed out, right? Um, it can be hard to use our no. And we can even find ourselves backtracking a little bit, remembering that healing is not linear, because then we have to find new ways to say no, you know, because we'll talk ourselves out of it. But being able to remember to recognize that if you are depleted, if you feel that place, we all know that place where you are getting exhausted, where your attitude is shifting because you're tired, you know, you're starting to recognize these things. These are all indicators that your body and your mind are telling you it's time to go sit down and have several seats somewhere, you know, and it's okay to do that. It's okay to lean into that. And the beautiful part about it is if you say no to somebody, the world will continue to spin. They will be all right.
Amen to that.
They will
Yes.
not die.
And people are they like they bounce back quicker than we think. We think people are going to be like mad or whatnot, and it's amazing how people will be like, "Oh, okay," and they just shift
Mm-hmm.
and go on, and it's like, "Oh, well, we dread that. We dread saying no to
Mm-hmm.
people."
We dread saying no like it is an ugly word.
Hmm. Yeah.
But it is not. It is not. So going on to the next one, they often have others who emulate them, not truly understanding the sacrifices it takes to be them. Now, it has been said that imitation is one of the highest compliments, when somebody aspires to be like us. But the problem, I don't say the problem, the challenge with this is that when we are not living as our authentic selves, and when we're wearing this cape, we're really not. We're leaning into the idea of ourselves or the idea of what others want us to be, how we're going to show up for others, how we're going to do this for everything else, even sometimes the inflated idea that we have gotten ourselves, right? But it's not our true self. The other thing is, it's very hard to do that. It is exhausting to try to be multiple people at one time.
Hmm.
Who we truly are, that fight between that and who we think everybody else needs or multiple spaces need. It's very exhausting. And so the people that sometimes will emulate really don't get it. They don't know how hard it is. And we enable that because we don't share. We're not saying our truth. We're not telling that truth. And so they're emulating and we're helping them create a terrible cycle if they choose to go through with that. Number 14, they keep the struggle to themselves and a small group of enablers. And this ties in with 13 as well. And if we notice some of the superheroes, we'll go with Batman right now. Now, Batman's, main guy he was going to tell him the truth, but not to a degree that it was going to make a huge difference from what Batman was going to do. At the end of the day, Bruce Wayne was going to do what Bruce Wayne wanted to do, and of course, we know we can't change grown people, but it's still something different about having people that will hold us accountable to the things that we choose to do for ourselves that are healthy.
Hmm.
But he made a decision; he was going to do what he wanted to do anyway, and so, in essence, those around him were just enabling him, and because they were enabled, he wouldn't tell them all the time the entire whole truth. Why? Because when we're not being authentic, it's easy not to tell the whole truth. It's easy
Yep.
not to lean into that. Again, authenticity, you know, it's a buzzword now, but let's just be real. It's not necessarily comfortable. It's the opposite
Wow.
of what we've been told and taught to do. And so trying to lead that double life again, those enablers, they help us do it. They help us do it. Even by some of the things they say in our ear, some of the things that they share with us, how they will jump on the bandwagon with us, and help us do the unhealthy thing. You know, are they helping you to stick to that goal of turning down that computer at 5 o'clock and going for a walk? Or are they helping you, do the healthier thing and reminding you that, hey, didn't you say y'all were having family time? What you doing working? Are they doing that? Or are they like, oh, it's okay. I'll watch the kiddos for you while you get in those last few hours, knowing full well that was not what what was healthy for you or what you said you were going to do, you know? And
Mhm.
sometimes, just like some of these things that we're doing as superheroes or wearing the cape, they're not terrible things. They just may not be the most healthy thing for us. And they definitely may not be leaning us into our most authentic self. And so, number 15, they find every reason not to rest and live genuinely in the moment, always thinking and planning for the next fight. And I'm going to say that one again.
Oh, yeah.
They find every reason not
Yep.
to rest and live genuinely in the moment, always thinking and planning for the next fight. I was watching an older movie a little bit ago, and I saw this quote, and I just had to share this quote because that is exactly what it reminded me of. The movie was Man About Town, and Ben Affleck lead. And at the end of the movie, he was walking out, and this was part of his dialogue as he was exiting. He said, I am nothing without the elixir of constant movement. I do not know
Mm.
how to just be still. I'm going to say that again too.
Wow.
I am nothing without the elixir of constant movement. I do not know how to just be still.
Hmm.
And how many of us, and myself included, would find it difficult to sit down and to actually do nothing, to be present in the moment without feeling guilty, to the point that even when we get sick, even when our bodies are telling us, giving us all the indicators we need to go sit down, that even then we will feel guilty about not being able to get up and do something. Don't know how to do it.
Yep.
Don't know how to sit still.
Well, and lack of movement, and sometimes forces us to be introspective.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a really hard thing to do because we are like that, that saying peace be still is like, oh,
Mm-hmm.
oh, that's uncomfortable. That silence or that lack of movement or not having somebody to save, because then we start thinking about our own issues or saving ourselves.
Right.
And we don't like that. So we run to the next fire.
Mm-hmm. Because when you're constantly
Hmm.
running to the next fire, you ain't got no time. You ain't got time to think about yourself. You don't have time to be introspective. You don't
Hmm.
have capacity for it either, you know. But when you're constantly moving, they're just beautiful distractions. And sometimes
Oh,
they're
yes.
beautiful distractions, but
Yes.
sometimes they are lovely distractions, from the local fundraiser to, the extra shifts at the job to the extra things and, putting something on your truck for somebody, knowing full well that you needed to rest,
Hmm.
and they're not terrible things. We as humans, we need connection. We do need each other and we do need to show up for each other. But we can do that without depleting ourselves. And so, number 16, And this is the last one. And it says simply love life. What's that, right? And,
Yes. Huh.
and when we are trying to be two people, when we are shaming and trying to hide parts of who we are, it affects our love life because those are very intimate spaces. Those are spaces where people get very, very close to us. And we cannot be fully intimate with someone when we are not being authentic, full and fully intimate with ourselves, honoring all of who we are and being unashamed to show up every day as our full selves is how we combat that. Now, again, that takes time because it's the opposite of what
Mm-hmm.
we've been taught that you should be ashamed of this, that you have to hide this, that you can't let people see all of you, right? But it's in that authenticity that we find the people who are our people, you know,
Absolutely, we do.
that are really our people. You
Yep.
I can look back, especially at really all of my marriages, but especially the first two. And I was just such a chameleon that I was showing up as whatever they needed, or whatever
Yep.
I thought that was. My first husband loved to dance and he loved to go out. I'm going to tell you, I did not like the club. I didn't
Mm-hmm.
understand it then, but I didn't like the crowds, you know, and it would drive me bonkers. But I would just put on a face and roll on out, you know. And so when I got to a point where I just no longer could do it, I just literally could not. For him, it was like, well, why not? What you doing? You boring. You got boring. No, I was always boring.
Right. Yep. And you just didn't know it.
You just
You
did
just didn't know it.
because
Mm-hmm.
I was trying to be this other person as opposed to who I was.
Mm-hmm. To please him, to have a connection.
To have a connection, and then it winds up being a false connection because this
Yep.
is not something that we have in common. And don't get me wrong, there's absolutely space and room for growth, for experiencing new things, for trying it to see if you don't like it. But
Yep.
there's a difference between just, to do that and trying things as opposed to pressing forward when you know it's not you.
Mm-hmm.
And
Well, yeah, we rob ourselves and that other person of finding the person that they're supposed to be with
absolutely.
because we're afraid to let go.
And that's not just for the romantic relationships, but yes, most certainly in our love lives, because that is such an intimate space. And eventually, the real you, parts of the real you, are going to start peeking out
Yes.
and it's going to throw
Yes.
the person for a loop or vice versa.
Yes. Yes. It causes a lot of controversy and hurt
Hmm.
because people feel that we have duped them into, you know, falling for this person that isn't who we really are,
Hmm.
truly, our whole self.
Right, right. So we have made it to the end.
Oh my God. So LJ, I'm just reading the comments here. LJ, you didn't miss something. Well, you can go back through the list up above, but we've been working through this list for the last 3 weeks. So, and so that's why we're finally being able to kind of come to the end. So, that's where the number 1 through 15 were. So just in case you were wondering. So, go ahead, Cassandra.
So I'd like to hear from you, those of you who may have had some questions or you had some comments. I know I did see some hands raised at the top. Love to hear your thoughts and move forward into a bit of discussion now that we've made it through. We've powered through. Okay.
Yes, yay, finally did it. I can't believe it. And there's also some questions in the chat too.
Okay, cool.
Kelly had a question. I know Z has your hand up. And LJ had some questions. So yes, so yeah, Z had her hand up right from the beginning though.
Okay. Z, I see your hand. Thanks.
My brain is blown up. This, all of the descriptions is me to the T, and I never, ever, ever thought that I was, the problem. I knew I had codependency issues, but I never thought that I had a cape on. Like, what's going on here? What? Holy, what is this? I don't want it on me. But it's so weird because today I was at a shadow call, and I've been debating whether to go visit my brothers up in Canada, and I don't really want to spend the money on myself. But then there at this call, somebody was saying, "Oh, I don't know how to get to the end of the month. I could be homeless." And then I thought, well, I could help this person, like with what I have, I could maybe share with this person and do that heroic thing, but I
Mhm.
won't do for myself. And I was sitting with that today, and it's like, what is that? And then I jump on this call and ching ching ching. Oh, duh. That explains why I haven't been able to do anything for myself yet, because I'm in this loop that I would lay myself down for somebody
Mhm.
else, but I can't do it for myself. That's insane. That's
Yeah.
absurd. I
But
can't.
no, thank you for your transparency and for sharing. And as some of these things hit, let's remind ourselves to be gentle with ourselves because, again, this didn't happen overnight. We didn't get here overnight. Many of us, we've been doing this since childhood in one degree or another. What only changed were the different people in the different,
Yep.
modalities, but it was the same thing. And so reminding ourselves to be very gentle with ourselves as we realize it. And it's just a reminder as you're moving forward for the next thing or the next opportunity, you have that chance to do something for yourself, and you find yourself deferring it to somebody else or to another thing, to check in. you know what is my motivation behind this? If it is truly vibrational and authentic, this is something I genuinely want to do. This is bringing me joy. I am happy about doing this. I feel good in my body about doing this, right? Um, that's one thing. However, if it is anything else, a lot of times that's just usually us leaning into that, people pleasers university degree and wearing this cape. you know, and that is something I have had to do as well in checking in with myself. Because again, I did PhD too.
Yep. You're definitely not alone in this, you guys.
Absolutely. I see your hand.
Is this read off of a book? I'm trying to see because I've read and researched codependency like all the way, but I haven't really searched this like superhero concept, like the way that it's, the outline, the way that it's explaining. I've never come across this before.
Oh, well, thank you. These are my connections to the superhero cape. And so be on the lookout. I should have uh, a book coming out about it, um, hopefully before the end of the year. A little bit behind schedule, but hopefully before the end of the year. So be on the lookout.
Would it have work?
Yay.
Would it have like work like, the ones that they have questions for to answer like
Yeah,
while reading the book?
yes, it'll be
Yay.
in workbook format. Yes.
Ah, I'm
Yeah.
excited. Thank you.
Yeah. What an accomplishment, Cassandra. Good for you. And so, yes, you guys are getting original sneak peek preview of her book before it ever comes out. So, Cassandra, wow, thank you for even, like sharing that with us because that's really big.
Thank you. Thank you again for the opportunity. I've been talking about this for some time, and it's like, okay, you done wrote all this stuff out. Might as well publish
That
it.
is awesome. That's, oh my gosh, wow, what a huge accomplishment. So before we go to the next question, and Kelly had a question in the chat, but I want to acknowledge Laura and Kelly D and Peaceful and Kathleen and Dina and Janine Argini and Sasha and LJ and Mandy, Tracy too. I see you guys that you joined a little bit later, so welcome. Um, but Kelly had a question that was interesting, about, do you think that this is related to trauma and maybe, or, it could be addiction or,
Mhm.
what do you think that some of these things are related to?
I think it 100% goes back to trauma, and something that we have to remember um, is that we don't compare traumas, that there is no trauma that's, oh my gosh, this is so much greater than another, because trauma affects everybody in different ways. And something that may affect one person in a really rough way may not affect another person that way, and vice versa. Um,
Hmm.
so it 100% goes back to trauma. And even what we know about addiction, we know that that even is often, that is a result of trauma. It's a response to trauma, usually in some way, shape, form, or fashion. And so, yeah, that's where it goes. And it kind of goes back to that first point. If you look, that they usually have a traumatic origin story that they refuse to deal with. And that word refuse in this setting, for some, it may be that you don't know, you know, because sometimes we just don't know. Um, we can think everything's happy hunky dory, that it wasn't that bad until we sit down and start talking. Um, as I've been looking at some of Dr. Gabor's stuff, he talks about that, that people will say, oh, I had such a great childhood. I don't understand, why I have this addiction or why I have this issue or what have you. And then when he starts asking them questions about their childhood, it was like, oh, yeah. And then my dad was an alcoholic and, beat up my mom. And oh, yeah. And then by the way, I was, this abuse happened and this happened, and there's a number of things, but because it wasn't, I lost an arm, or I was in the war. It's this couldn't be trauma, and so we have to think that there are things that we went through. Oftentimes, they date so much further back than whatever was the catalyst to send you into your intentional healing journey. There are things that usually happened way back that was the quote unquote original trauma. So yeah, it roots in trauma. And a lot of times it's not necessarily that trauma. It is the message we start telling ourselves. And we talked a little bit about that, I think, in the first week we were here. What are some of the messages that we start to tell ourselves? I know one of the messages, one of the reoccurring thoughts that happened, and I remember thinking this as a kid in foster care, was that I was alone, that I was so alone. And so what happens, when I find myself triggered at times, what have you, it goes right back to that thought that I'm alone. And so many of the things that I found myself in, even the rough relationships, were because I was trying to do what? Not be alone,
Hmm.
you know. And so, yeah, a lot of that stuff, it goes right back to the messages that we told ourselves surrounding that trauma, which is why it's important to do the work. And it's hard to do the work when we're saving the world.
Go ahead, Kathy.
Um, I had the opportunity to kind of work on um, that trauma and getting to the root cause of why I felt like I had to do everything.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and it was directly related to something that I didn't think was abuse, but it was because my father was an alcoholic. Now, he
Mm-hmm.
didn't beat me. Um, and my mom was there, but we had a very large family. So I was just kind of like left to myself. So I had a lot of neglect. And early on, I discovered that, well, if I do things for people, then that gets me positive attention and attention in general. And then it kind of just went on steroids um, as I got older, and then and even in my like adult life, I was always, like doing and doing that super people pleaser person. And it all stemmed from that little child part of me just wanting any type of attention. Um, and that was how I satisfied that need. Um, and then it creates issues now because, as an adult, you got to learn how you want to live, not just how you want to survive. Like what you did to survive worked, yes, but now we're at a different place.
Hi. You had a good time at the park? That is it. Yeah, I guess I had an okay time. George come back with you?
I hear someone talking.
Krista Airy, do you mind muting? Thank you. And Kathy, thank you so much for your transparency and for sharing. And yes, I love how you were able to get to the root of that. I'm just sending hearts your way because that is such a beautiful thing to be able to get to that. And I love how you pointed out about those things that you did to survive, because whatever made that helped you make that decision when you were a kid, that this was the way you got that attention, this was the way you pushed through. You're right. It served you well. It helped you survive, you know. But as we are intentionally healing, as we're making that decision to heal, those things just don't know. They just don't serve us anymore, you know. And I love how you were able to point that out and to see that.
Self-awareness.
Mm-hmm.
Self-awareness is
Absolutely.
key. Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that was beautiful. Thank you for sharing that.
You're
So,
welcome.
Cassandra, can we switch gears for a second here and go into the chat again
Yes.
and and um and address, I don't know, did you see Jeannie's questions that she had asked about, some of your marriages? And I know she's been married once for 44 years, but it's just, it's really very, very heavy on her
Okay.
and trying to figure it out and unravel, unravel that
Yes. Yes.
situation that she's in.
Okay. And I'm just going to read, if it's okay, Jeannie. Um, Jeannie says that I found that while I have been truly authentic, my husband of 44 years, without me knowing it, took and used that against me, along with my committed and loving, my commitment and loving and lovingly giving for the love and taking one for the other and not considering me. I have a question. Okay. I came in late. She said I've been married 3 times. Girl, don't give me another one yet. Okay. Don't give me just 3.
That's awesome. It's never too late, Cassandra.
Oh, look, I'm believing, but we hadn't had it yet. Is it what I heard? I would like to figure out after being married for 44 years, I hold myself accountable and don't let this happen again. Would like to ask Cassandra if she's married multiple abusive relationships. Well, what have I learned? Okay. And what would she say to someone if they are just experiencing this after decades of being in a marriage? Okay, got you. I couldn't see y'all. So, first of all, Jeannie, thank you for your question. Oh my gosh, the things I've learned. I think one of the biggest things that I learned was being myself, um, no matter what. And that was really hard because I had become such a chameleon to just show up and be myself, to learn to love myself, which was something that I did not do before. Before in those relationships, I was really waiting on somebody else to love me, to validate who I was, to validate my person. I was waiting for somebody to help fill that void. And so, because of that, um, I've kind of settled for whomever would show up and say, I love you. And I'd be like, okay, yeah, let's do this thing. Let's get married. Yeah, not a great idea. I don't advise it. But through this process, I have learned to love myself. And each time after each marriage, I thought I was doing better. And don't get me wrong, one of them was quote unquote better than the other, on paper. But they were essentially, they had so many similarities underlying. And that was because the unhealed spaces in me was still attracted to their unhealed spaces. And so I ultimately just married different versions of actually my mother, you know. So it was taking the time to really start to pour into myself, taking my mental health seriously for the first time ever, just before my last marriage, and then pressing through the discomfort of that divorce, and to still be on an intentional healing journey, even when I realized how bad that marriage had turned. So I said the most important thing I learned was to really just start being me, whatever that looked like that day. And it was not easy. It was so not easy. Even more so, and I don't know how many paraprofessionals and service workers we have in here, but in roles, even working in roles where you had to sometimes not show up as you fully were because it would be uncomfortable for your clients. Of course, not knowing what I know now I'm just me, period. But at that time, I did not know that. And so, even in those spaces, to a degree, wearing a mask. And so, it just got to the point where it's like, nope, you know what? This is me, for better, for worse, period. You can like it, you can love it, but this is who I am. And it doesn't matter now whether I'm here on a call, whether I'm with my grandbabies, whether I'm at church. It doesn't matter where I am at my nonprofit. You're getting the same person everywhere. It's not me trying to mold myself into whatever that environment needs to be. And that was something that I did a whole lot during those marriages, because I just didn't know, and I didn't love myself or allow myself to honor those other parts of myself that weren't pretty, that weren't cool. I wanted to shove them away like they didn't exist. But those things are parts of me too. And now I just accept them like, hey, yeah, I'm going to be late. So I'm sorry in advance. This is this is just it. But before,
Real life.
in real life, in real life, Saturday I went to an all girls kind of Christmas bash, and I was the next to the last person to come in. And so when the last person got there, she's always late too. And so, they were teasing her, and I just looked at her and I said, well, it was going to be one of us. So, I'm just letting it go. This is me, sorry. Oh,
That's awesome.
Jeannie, I see your hand.
Thank you for taking the time to listen to me. I appreciate that very much, Cassandra and Anna. I appreciate it very much. I did have a couple follow-up questions from that.
Mhm.
And I'm gonna be frank in a loving way, because that's how I am. So I'm gonna be me, because I am authentic, and that's something that I have always been. I would say I agree with some of what Cassandra said, but I also feel that you could be and some people struggle with being authentically themselves. But I also feel that there are people who are authentically themselves and might be a little different, and they can be taken advantage of. So that, I would say, I'm more in that category. And I appreciate what Cassandra said, that she was talking about her mother, and how the things with her mother. And I don't know. I just think maybe perhaps that's something that we're upset with ourselves about. That maybe our my mother was an incredible woman. I mean, there's just no question about it. And I kind of sometimes get mad at her because she allowed me to be so real and authentic and so caring, honestly, that it's caused me harm.
Cassandra, what do you think of that? I mean, that's a really interesting perspective too. Thank you, Jeannie.
Yes, thank you so much for your transparency, Jeannie, always. And yes, I expect you to be frank. Always.
I am, because I'm over 50, so welcome to, that's what
Yeah, we don't
happens.
care anymore after 50. No,
It's
Yes.
really
that's the
really
one
true.
good thing about getting older.
Oh my God.
Right. And I'm just gonna have to say this. You didn't still answer my question about, you've been married 3 times, and I'm just I don't want to be in that boat.
Oh yeah, yeah. I didn't.
I don't want to be in that boat. I'm not gonna be in that boat. At this point I don't want to ever get married again, but perhaps maybe that'll change for me.
Mhm.
And I want to know the red flags, and I am going to be frank. It's concerning to me that you've been married 3 times.
Mm,
And for somebody to be, but I'm at the beginning stage of all this kind of thing, and I do
mhm,
take a whole lot of responsibility for
mhm,
what's happened to me. And because I do that, I'm also holding myself a lot of accountability,
mhm.
and still trying not to lose the good soul that I am.
Absolutely.
Really. And
Absolutely.
so I'm just going to be frank with you. You didn't answer that question, and I am in a very unique situation. I do understand that I am, and I'm going to make a difference somehow. I really am. When I get through this part, I am going to help other people. I've always helped other people, but I'm going to help
Okay,
other
so
people who
yeah,
are
thanks,
going through
Jeannie.
something.
So
Okay,
Cassandra, what
thanks.
what are your thoughts?
So, a few thoughts here. One, I imagine as you were saying as you were kind of wrapping up, Jeannie, that yes, you already probably are very much helping other people. Because it just sounds from the things that you've shared that that's just part of who you are and what you do. So I'm sure that as you continue your intentional healing journey, that will just increase. Excuse me. Um, the other thing to consider, and this is something that we have to be mindful of when we're walking our intentional healing journey, is while we can learn from each other and grow from each other, from each other's experiences, is to be mindful not to compare. Because comparison is not necessarily helpful, even when it's good. Comparison, right? It just doesn't help. We don't compare traumas and we don't compare each other's situations because there are so many circumstances that get people to where they are, whether that is to stay the long term in marriages or whether not. I can very much trace my giving the deuces in my marriages all the way back to my adoption story. I didn't know that at the time, but there was that part of me that could only take so much of the abuse, and then I was out. Of course, I had no language for that at the time I was going through this. I've been on this journey now for over 10 years of intentional healing, but it did not start out that way. And the person that you're hearing now was definitely not that person who was just screaming on the inside for anybody to please love me. Just a different person. I was very much in an unhealed space, walking around with undiagnosed bipolar disorder, and that was a very different Cassandra than who is here today. The other thing is that when I say the term how we're not being our full selves in comparison to, what I shared with the list, it's not that everyone that, can see this is not being themselves at all. Yes, there were things about myself that I hung to, like, for instance, being an avid reader. if you talk to either one of my husbands, they will, if they don't know nothing else about me, they remember that I love to read because I was reading every chance I got. It was something that brought me pleasure and it was an escape for me. So there were things that I did hold on to and that I did still practice even then and still do now. But there were a lot of other things that weren't. And that was those small compromises that we make. Now, some people do have beautiful, strong personalities. They had more security, and they do find themselves in relationships with people that take advantage of them. But even in that, as we sit and we're going through our intentional healing journey, it's important that we do some work because even bringing up, that dynamic with your mom, that may take some, kind of digging through a little bit in therapy. Because remember, things that may have been traumatic to one may not be traumatic to somebody else. And so while it may not have been that there was physical abuse or emotional abuse or what have you, there could be something there in the dynamic of the relationship or just period that you don't even really recall right now that caused you to show up in certain ways. This in no way, shape, form, or fashion, when we're looking at taking accountability, is a demeaning of what happened to you, of how somebody treated you, or saying that it wasn't real or that it wasn't wrong. That's not what it's saying when we're making this thing. But for especially those of you who've been in my spaces before, we always bring the conversation back to us because it doesn't matter if it is one relationship that we were in for a very long time or if it was multiple relationships and you were married 17 million lemon times.
Right.
At the end of the day, we are still the common denominator in all of our relationships. That doesn't change. And so for the real work to be done, it has to start with us. It has to start with that introspection. And yes, we can recognize the wrongs that somebody did to us. We can honor that pain in our feelings because our feelings are 100% our feelings. They are real, they are raw, they're there, right? But when we want to change, and I don't like to put a but there after that, as we are leaning toward going into that intentional healing journey and wanting to come out further along, that is where we pick apart some of these things. And some of these things are not easy to pick apart. They're just not. They're uncomfortable. And ask ourselves some of these tough questions. And sometimes that means sitting in a question a little bit longer to see, okay, well, what was really going on with me? What why did I move like this? Or why did I think like this? Or why did I attract these type of people into my life? And that was one of the things for me after my last marriage. It was like, okay, now look at here. This was number 3.
Yep. So, this is where also that giving ourselves grace comes in. Um, and in the healing journey to allow the grace to seep in the introspection, and the self-love and the self-forgiveness, you guys.
Absolutely.
You guys, it's after 11. I am going to have to stop for tonight. Um, and I know Cassandra is going to be joining us again next week. We are going to be changing topics. So next week, we're going to be talking, getting ready for the holidays, because I know that's really a lot for a lot of us to handle. So I do want to thank everybody for coming tonight. Cassandra, thank you again so much for all the time that you've given to us these last 3 weeks, and that you will continue to give to us over the next couple of weeks. So I just send all of you lots of hugs. Join Cassandra's rooms, follow her on Circles, read her bio. She does individual coaching as well outside of Circles, you guys. Um, but I do need to say goodnight, and I just want to thank all of you again, and big hugs to all of you.
Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you guys so much. Get some sleep tonight. Get some rest.
Thank you.
You're so welcome. I'll see you next week.
Looking forward.
Yes.
All right.
Bye.
Yes, you are. I'm sorry. Thank you. I honestly feel like I was just writing in my journal that I feel like the universe is against me, right? So I'm normally pretty positive, but I am because of and then I opened up circles and attended a session a moment ago, and then I looked and saw this one, and it was like, when you go to, I'm not again prefacing this by saying that that I'm Christian. But just like the analogy, I think is relevant. Like when you go to church or you go to wherever you practice, and you feel like the message is there for you that day. And so I feel like seeing this title of managing emotional triggers from financial stress, I'm like, oh my God, this is exactly what I've been doing for the last 2 hours, is in my room crying because all I wanted to do this year, after experiencing a tremendous character building journey with my physical and mental health, that has my son living with his father primarily. Now, I was able to move into the same building and we're on different floors, but he's still primarily with dad. So Christmas has always been our thing. So I'm pretty much, we have our traditions, etc. And all I wanted to do, I set my intention earlier on that, okay, I'm going to make it happen this year in spite of all of that I'm enduring right now. And it's like every step I took, I was hit with another bill. He was having a situation at school. He's about to be 13. And his friends were encouraging him to fight this boy. And I was like, no. So I took him on the roof and I showed him about making his own like rage room kit or whatever, because we couldn't make it to the rage room. And I was like, this is another way, boxing and X, Y, and Z. And he loved it. But in the middle of that, we broke 2 tiles on the apartment building ceiling, rooftop deck. And so now I hear from the property manager today that, oh yeah, although it's only $77 for the 2 tiles, it's $425 for a delivery fee. So now it's $500 that I'm like having to figure out, how am I coming up with that? And then he gets a serious migraine yesterday, just randomly hanging out with me. We wind up in the emergency room and I find out that his father has switched his insurance. So now there's a $250 copay that they're looking at me for. And it was like one thing after another in the last 5 days. And so now it's going to make Christmas incredibly challenging for me to do what I needed to do. So, a very long story. You just said, I'm so frustrated and I feel like I'm damned if I do and damned if I don't. And now I know that experiences matter and he really cares about just, hanging out with mom. But I also have that mom guilt of not being there present for him all the time. And Christmas is just our thing. And I feel like, God, universe, why couldn't you just let me have this thing, this one thing, to just be joyful with my son? And anyway, thanks for letting me share.